Hey Shrish, welcome to Magnifloss, a channel where we talk about anything and everything, whatever's on our minds at the present point in time. Also, the channel in which I define the present point in time to mean the span of time between 3 p.m. and whatever p.m. or a.m. that it takes for me to figure out what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it and how I'm going to edit it, in which the sun always sets in the background, making the impending doom presented by the passage of time all too clear, as is made the quality of my phone camera. But anyways, back to the actual present point in time. That was a really interesting video. It had never really occurred to me just how rigid our instruments really are. And I really enjoyed your little movie magic demos of the double basses in their different tunings. I want to start this video off with 2 questions of my own for you regarding music. Number 1, have you ever had any crazy ideas for new instruments that could potentially exist? Like, for example, remember that episode of Magic School Bus where Arnold was trying to figure out how to design this crazy, wacky instrument that sounded all weird? Miss Frizzle's aunt was playing some weird, spooky music in the middle of the night, I think. By the end of the episode, Arnold figures out how to design his instrument in a way that actually sounds good alongside the other ones. Have you ever had any ideas such as that for some crazy instruments? I'd really like to know, perhaps in your next video. And question number 2. You mentioned how taking some of the old stuff and making it new could potentially get more listeners of classical music. Well, I really wonder what your reaction is whenever you hear some modern piece of music, whether it's in a movie or a game or in TV, that is largely based on or incorporates some sort of piece from classical music. Like, you know, in Breath of the Wild, the Great Fairy Fountain theme is based on, I think it's Fantasy Impromptu, I probably butchered that. And I recently watched the movie 10. Whose theme I realize is based on Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. You know, there's countless examples. Is your reaction to these pieces of music something like, great, this is getting more people engaged with classical music and perhaps attracting more potential listeners? Or is it more along the lines of they're just taking these old masterpieces and simplifying them, dumbing them down, and just destroying the musicality in them to simply just make it more palatable to the modern listeners? So please let me know. I'd really love to know your thoughts on this. It's the second question to you about classical music and its incorporation into modern entertainment that really gets me thinking about the broader question of how do you make something that is less mainstream and less enjoyable by the masses today more enjoyable and more mainstream. One approach, as in the classical music in entertainment example, is to obviously use something that's already mainstream as a vehicle to present something that isn't as easy to appreciate. One thing that's already mainstream is humor and acting kind of ridiculous on the internet. And channels like Vsauce tailor this in order to explain what can be seen as extremely inaccessible concepts like the Banach-Tarski paradox from the obscure field of measure theory in math. How does one get 31 million views on something like that? One of my favorite rappers is Eminem, and he's super big, but nowadays I'm seeing a lot of people criticize him for his style because it's just, they say it's too old school, that people don't really like this type of stuff. They like things that have a snappy beat, some catchy lyrics, have some perhaps nonsensical repetitive lyrics. They don't really care about the wordplay inside the bars and the double and triple entendres here and there and the metaphors and the flow. They just want to have fun. They want to show off their, you know, their new Rolex. They want to show off whatever. The point is, that's what's become mainstream now. So as an artist, right, what do you do when you encounter a change in general interest? There's not really one single solution. Eminem's solution was to stick with its original style for certain tracks, but also go with the more modern style, like using a bouncy beat with a catchy hook and collaborating with more rising artists to produce something new and original that has an element of the modernness in it, but also is unique to his own style. And this sort of adaptation is seen everywhere. The issue is selling out, right? Once you start to see that you're getting more of an audience as you start incorporating more mainstream elements, there's this temptation to just go full on mainstream and just forget that which you came to make newly mainstream or keep something mainstream. And this is exactly the type of thing that eminent director Martin Scorsese fears is happening with cinema when you have these huge franchise films like The Avengers and the Marvel film franchise as a whole. Although he does admit that if he did grow up in this generation, he would likely enjoy these type of films and actually would want to direct them too. He feels as if doesn't really convey the true essence of cinema as he's known it to be. Now, I'm personally not sure whether I agree with that or not, because I do think that there's a decent amount of story within these Marvel films, but a large reason why audiences watch these films is because of the visual spectacle. However, I don't really have much doubt that there are large chunks of this audience that see these type of films and are encouraged to watch other sorts of cinema and other genres of film that even Martin Scorsese would probably agree are true cinema. Now, the math curriculum in middle school and high school suffers in this very interesting way because they think that they can keep the subject more interesting to students by appealing to its applications, which is true to a certain extent because basically every single subfield in math is based off some real-world inspiration. But then they forget that the whole reason for appealing to the real world was to build motivation for the subject, not necessarily because you want to apply the math to the real world again. Math definitely can be used as a tool, as it should, but as you mentioned in your question, that isn't its true purpose or essence. But to best illustrate what I mean, I'm gonna have to go into another video on this topic, so I will hold on to your questions till the next time. But until then, Shrish, good luck for the next and final college semester, and I'll see you next week.